tonight's adventure with the Fat Man.
Okay, here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whatever time of day it is, I hope it's good to be where you are, because I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Baltimore Fats, and this is the Balance of Power. Yeah. Okay, finally. I had trouble nailing that one this morning.
All right, so I'm going to start this one with what this video was supposed to be about. All right, and the video I had been prepping, on the heels of the last video, and the one I was really thinking about all weekend long was the video I was going to do about Dr. Leonard Poe, and further connecting the idea that the Poe family could be sort of like this hidden royalty. Because Dr. Leonard Poe is one of the court physicians to King James I and to King Charles I. And then, again, underscoring that line of, it's not so much who the Poes are, but how connected they are and who they seem to be around, and the places that they can connect and how wealthy they were, and the fact that they were never given any sort of nobility, right? No peerages, no lordships, baronies, nothing. When it seems to me, like looking back, that just about anybody who owned a half-acre land was given some form of barony or peerage, and considering that if you were trying to hide things that were going on in your royal forests and hiding your sort of mythological, supernatural roots to your bloodlines, because again, you're keeping some sort of records, you're providing a history for future generations to go back and look at, but you also need it to be a history that can be easily manipulated, or perhaps, again, even created from whole cloth, who knows, but, if you wanted to lose things, you would lose it with subordinates. You would lose it with people who you didn't need records kept about. Right? And so that burying a royal family with the Poe name as yeomen and farmers and underkeepers would be a slick way to do that. Right? And so again, I was going to talk more about that and make some more connections. When I first looked into what the Poe family name meant and tracing it back, to Poher, Ponkar, Powell, Poer, and all these names, all having an original meaning of power. And that, like William the Conqueror, when he was putting his Ponkars and Poers in places, was instilling the power there. I thought that was really interesting because Bewley, in the end, absolutely asserts that the reason it's so difficult to find the true ancestral origins of like the Poe family and some of these other families is because they're actually all Powells. And that as they moved around England and Scotland and Ireland and so forth, it was the regional dialects and accents and pronunciations that caused the variations, because there was no written standard for the English language, so they would be written phonetically. And so a Powell in one county in England would be a Powell in another, would be a Poole in another. And so it was just written down. So as the families were traveling, their names evolved with the local dialects and accents, right? And that the Edgar Allan Poe family traces itself back to the Powell family, right? And so that the Powell name evolved from this ancient Gaelic and Welsh name, Ap Powell. Right? And so the Powell family name derives itself from the name Ap Hywel, right? Which means son of Hywel, right? And Hywel is angelicized as Howell. So Powell and Howell are pretty much the same name, right? And, they, I think it's interesting they say that it's an uncommon name among those of Welsh ancestry, but it literally means power, right? This Howell means power, right? And that, right, originates with the dynasty of kings in Wales and Brittany in the 9th and 10th century, right? So just before the Norman, or concurrent with the Norman invasion. So in that period, right before the Norman invasion, right? And that the House of Tudor descends from the family Ap Hywel, right? Or Powell and Howell. And so now this is what's crazy about the Poe family and this Powell surname and the fact that it could be like this hidden royal family line, right? And so if the House of Tudor comes from this Poe family line, right? And the Poes of Edgar Allan Poe's family come from the same Powell line, and trying to maybe connect that to some form of secret royalty, this proximity game starts to get a lot more interesting, especially with who they knew and when they were there, right? Because Dr. Leonard Poe becomes court physician under King James, which is the transition from the Tudor dynasty to the Stuart dynasty. Right? But we know that the Poes were in this region of England. And I did find, although I don't have it up, I did find confirmation that Poe's family was an undertaker of Sherwood Forest going back to at least 1560. So roughly 30 years before his name appears on that paper in 1591. So at least a generation before that Richard Poe, unless that Richard Poe is still like some 60, 70 years old, maybe. But so for at least 30 years before Richard Poe's name is on that paper in 1591, we have Poes in this region and connected, right? We have Poes as a Poa. So we have Poes 1560 in this region, and I'm assuming earlier with Byron being the keeper of the forest going back into the 1400s, and evidence that the Poes were there as long as that as well, right? They seem to be intimately connected to like this Tudor dynasty and the transition, right? And again, without any sort of nobility to them. You know, there's never a Duke or a Lord Poe. And I thought it was interesting, and I don't know if this came up in while I was editing the show or if I actually talked about it in the show, but with, you know, this idea of the Poes being, you know, secret royalty, and the coat of arms of the County Tyrone having this hand on it. You know, and so if you're the hidden hand, right? And if you're the unseen hand, and again, we all know that the hidden hand plays a huge part in the, you know, Freemasonry and Illuminati symbology and all this other stuff, right? And what better way to hide being the hidden hand than putting the hand on your coat of arms, right? Hiding in plain sight. You know, the Poes seem to get to dance back and forth. They are there for the transitions of the Tudors to the Stuarts, right? From the Stuarts to the brief Cromwellian reign, they're there. I mean, they're part of Cromwell's armies. They're backing the kings. They're just all around this. You know, and again, and seeing that their properties are so connected to, you know, the Baron Baltimore and the Carrolls, and, you know, we got the Dunlaps coming from areas and more people that I didn't get to stuff. It's really getting to be crazy. Right, so I thought I was going to do a fun episode exploring those lines. But then at some point Sunday afternoon, I got a comment on one of my Poe videos from my friend Jason Hand here. And he was kind enough to remind me that although I'd been lost in Sherwood Forest, you know, camping out knee deep in the woods there for a few weeks, that there really has been this weird election thing going on. Right? And that, you know, with the Poe Chronicles and the COVID stuff and the King of the Hill stuff I was doing before that, you know, I really hadn't paid attention to this campaign cycle at all. You know, and Biden kind of seemed the whole time to be a kind of like lame duck candidate to me anyway. Because, you know, of course, these things are all rigged and set up in advance anyway. We all know who's really running the show, which is, of course, the bankers, you know, and that the left and right paradigm is really, you know, the one paradigm with a left and a right side, you know, red and blue make purple. Right? And, you know, so I hadn't paid that close attention at all, but I was surprised when he said that, you know, Biden's lineage goes right through Baltimore, because I hadn't heard that. And so at first I was really shocked, and then a quick search revealed that, yes, Biden's grandfather was born here in Baltimore. And so as surprised as I was about not having heard that along the way, because again, while not being the most well-informed person, I'm not uninformed either, but it's easy to see how that could slip through the cracks. You know, it was his grandfather, you know, and they really play up the Scranton, Pennsylvania working class angle on him, you know, so easy to see how that one slipped by, right? But it's what I learned later in the day that shocked me even further, right? And thank you again, Jason, if I didn't say it. Thank you so much for this comment. But I found out later that day that Biden was Roman Catholic, and now that really, really shocked me. How hadn't I heard that before? Because again, not the most informed, but not the least informed either. And I would think somewhere along the way with any one of the channels I watched, they would have mentioned that Biden was Roman Catholic, because there's only been one Roman Catholic president elect, right? And that was John Kennedy. And we know what happened to him. But I could not believe that that was not mentioned anywhere, and that there could be any sort of papal connection to the presidency. All right, it just astounded me that that wasn't picked up along the way by me. And again, I will admit to sleepwalking through this presidential campaign but really, really sort of astonishing. And so that made me kind of think about, oh, maybe I'll spend my Monday morning looking into Biden's ties and to Baltimore and trying to take a little break from Poe, because I've been at Poe for a while now. Yeah. And so that's kind of how when I woke up on Monday morning, that's kind of how I was approaching it. Okay, I'm going to look into Biden's Baltimore history and his Roman Catholicism because that's really interesting. That really ties into Baltimore, especially with what was going on with King of the Hill and tying all those religions together at the top of that. And so as I was getting things set up on Monday morning, I noticed that one of my favorite channels posted a new video overnight. And so I figured I would check that out as I was setting things up. Most of his videos are really, really short, and I really enjoy them. He cracks me up. And definitely one of my favorite channels. All right. And so his video that he posted yesterday, and this is Barricade Garage, by the way, absolutely love him. So he did this video, Republicans right now, because again, on the heels of, President-elect Biden. And right. So, he may be an acquired taste. He's not quite for everybody. So hopefully you're not offended by this. But I'm going to play a couple of seconds of this. So this is Republicans right now.
Mama, call me when you get this message.
Shut the up right now.
But Joe Biden is gonna be the next president.
Jerome Powell is the 16th chair of the Federal Reserve. He is your president.
He gonna take.
And when I heard that, did you hear? I was like, wait a minute. Did he just say Powell was the 16th chair of the Federal Reserve and he was our real president? Powell, the name that has been just rolling around in my head, connected to the secret power going on. He is the president of the Federal Reserve. And again, now my mind is almost never in modern politics or who's, in these power positions these days. I much rather, play under my Mud City paradigm puzzle tree, in the shade. There's plenty of mud under there. It's kind of a safe environment for me. And I don't really have to get involved with people in their hardcore politics, right? Because that's really not my strongest suit, right? But I do have an understanding that it is the banking elite and the Federal Reserve that are really running the show, right? That's always been the case. And I have voted third party in every election that I've been eligible since 1992. I missed the 1988 election by 9 weeks. I turned 18 in January of 89. But when he said that he was the real president, I was like, oh my God, right? Connecting this together. And so I had to look at him. I didn't know anything about him, right? Other than now hearing that his name was Powell and connecting the Powell name through Edgar Allan Poe back to meaning power. All right, and this is unbelievable. All right, I mean, it starts right with his birthday. You cannot make up this birthday. February 4th. That's a 6, right? 1953. You add that all up. That's 18, which is 3 6s, right? And he's the 16th chair, which is 2 8s. And you get 2 8s out of this one too, if you wanted to get them there. And you can get an 8 here on a February 4. 8s and 6s everywhere on this guy. It's absolutely crazy. You cannot invent that kind of numerology if those are some of your sacred numbers that you're looking for. It's just absolutely insane. All right, and so let's take a look at his early life, right? He's born in D.C., right? And in this paradigm, D.C., of course, is a highly occultic center. Thank you for verifying that. I think it's interesting that when talking about his early life and his history, that they start with his maternal grandfather. They don't start paternally, but maternally, right? And that his maternal grandfather, James Hayden, was dean of the Columbus School of Law at Catholic University of America. And so that immediately got my fat sense tingling because I just found out that Biden was a Catholic, right? And this guy's great-grandfather, Powell, was professor of law at Catholic University of America. All right, and that Powell graduated from Georgetown Prep, which was a Jesuit university. So we have a Jesuit Catholic in charge of the Federal Reserve, while sitting as president-elect is Joe Biden, Roman Catholic. Right? How did they sneak this by? It's just unbelievable, just not paying attention to that at all. And especially with the reputation in the truth community and everything of the elite bankers being global Zionists, right? But yet we have a Jesuit sitting as the chair of the Federal Reserve right now, And we have a Roman Catholic sitting as president-elect right now. And although I guess this is very fluid and things are changing, I did maybe hear this afternoon that Pennsylvania withdrew, and so now he's no longer President-elect Biden. And again, this thing is scripted for maximum drama and tension and riot-inducing evilness. So, that's what this election cycle is all about, right? And so now this jumped me before I could even look at Biden. Right, and so even just looking at his wiki page, still not all that interesting. And it's amazing that he kind of got as far as he did, because it certainly doesn't seem like he got there from his pedigree, right? I mean, he didn't go to the best schools, although they weren't terrible. I mean, there's nothing wrong with Syracuse or anything like that, but it's not Harvard or Yale or, anything like that. It's not Georgetown. He always finished in the bottom third, to be generous, in his classes, but he was able to get into office quite young. But, seeing some of his tragic early life with the loss of his daughter around the time he first becomes elected senator in 1972, and his connection now to being a Roman Catholic, and, the Roman Catholic connections to the early pagan religions, because again, it seems that Roman Catholicism and a lot of what we know as Christianity today is really just transmogrified paganism, right? That perhaps his wife and daughter couldn't, and maybe even his other two children, if they were involved with the accident, were supposed to be some form of ritual sacrifice, although I won't say that as a definite, but it's hard to, in this paradigm, it's kind of hard to not think that way. And so again, really not that much to go on with this, except when it gets to his family and his ancestry. All right, we'll start with his early life, and I think it's funny, he looks a little bit like the Beaver to me, starring Joe Biden as the Beaver and Leave It to Biden. But it says that, born in Scranton, they really pushed that narrative, that working class narrative out of Scranton, Pennsylvania, right? But it says here that his father was initially wealthy, but had suffered several financial setbacks by the time Biden was born, which is kind of convenient for, this working class narrative that they set up for him, and that his grandfather was a wealthy oil businessman from Baltimore. All right, and this is the Baltimore tie that my friend Jason was telling me about. I think it's interesting that he was an oil man, and that Biden had said at one point in the debates that he was going to try to get rid of fossil fuels, yet that's where his family's money at least originally came from. All right, but even more than that, I want to get into his ancestry. All right, further back than his grandfather, right? Right, because it says here that Biden's paternal third great-grandfather, William Biden, 1787 to 1849, was born where? In Sussex, England. Now that is absolutely incredible to me, with the attention that Sussex has been drawing in the Mud City Puzzle Paradigm Tree. With the declaration, with the Sussex Declaration, and some of the families coming out of there, and how much of southern England was royal forest at one point. And again with these families. So how could it be that his third great-grandfather, his great-great-great-grandfather, is from Sussex, which is connecting to this false paradigm in ridiculous ways recently? And that is unbelievable, but gets even crazier when you look at his mother's family. Because his mother's family was of Irish descent, right? With roots variously attributed to County Louth and County Londonderry. And now when I saw that, my jaw just dropped, because not only did I have the Sussex in here now, what you guys don't know, because I haven't really talked about it at all, is that Londonderry is part of the plantation of Ulster, right? It is here, right next to County Tyrone, right? So Biden's mother's family, and there are Poes in Londonderry. He does talk about Londonderry in here somewhere, but I couldn't find a direct connection to Poes owning property there. But again, with the name variations, I'm sure there were Powells or Poas or somebody like that in Londonderry, right? So the whole plantation of Ulster, all right, so now, it's just unbelievable. Biden's family, right in the same count, right to the county next to County Tyrone, where the Poes had land holdings, right? And again, the proximity and the fact that they're around these families, or can be connected to these families in some way, shape, or form, that had me thinking more about that hidden hand. We have Powell as the chair of the Federal Reserve. We have Biden's family coming from Sussex and from Londonderry, which was a part of the Ulster plantation, so close to. All right, and so now my mind is absolutely blown because we have Powell, the 16th chair of the Federal Reserve, whose name connects to the same family as Edgar Allan Poe's family derived their name from. And again, it's interesting with these families and these variations, they could be completely different families, right? But when you're a false paradigm speculator and you see a guy with such a pedigree and position as Jerome Powell and Joe Biden, it's hard not to think that they would be connected to these bloodlines, especially one that potentially means power, right? And hidden power at that, right? Because again, with the shield of County Tyrone having the hand on it, and the idea that the Powells and Poes and Poers and so forth could be a hidden royal family, with Tyrone having that hand on it, I wanted to see which other counties in Ulster would have the hand, right? And wouldn't you know it, Londonderry has it. Londonderry has it, which is where Biden's mother's family's from, right? And I think it's interesting that Londonderry has the crown here with these two weird dragony creatures representing England. All right, County Tyrone, as we mentioned, which has the knight with the sword, has the red hand, but also Antrim has it. All right, Antrim has it as well, and Antrim is this one here. So essentially, the three counties that have the hand on it, Tyrone, Londonderry, and Antrim, and Antrim and Londonderry right up in here, this is where Giant's Causeway is, and I think that's interesting if, you want to put any merit into the giant tree theory that was a while back, which is something that really fascinates me and I think plays a big part of this paradigm, and that the Giant's Causeway could have at one time been a giant tree. So really, really amazing that now this hand can be connected to these three counties, can be connected to Edgar Allan Poe's family and Joe Biden's family. And that Joe Biden's family connects to Sussex, and that the Powell in charge of the Federal Reserve, so really incredible, like following this sort of, secret, not so secret hand, is these three counties here in the plantation of Ulster. And I just also have to point out too that Ulster as a plantation itself, its flag is the hand. So we have a red right hand, all over the plantation of Ulster in the president-elect's family, right? In Edgar Allan Poe's family. The Poe's family comes from Powell. Powell means power. There's a Powell sitting as the 16th chair of the Federal Reserve, and so I just think it's absolutely incredible that this research, which, was blowing my mind when looking at it through the false historical paradigm of the late 19th and early 20th centuries and earlier, can be tied so directly into what is happening today. And that's something that's been backed up too by the Master of Reality research with the things coming out of Johns Hopkins, with the COVID and so forth, right? It is just absolutely incredible. So if you want to have a balance of power, I guess that would be one way to do it. Okay, so I'm going to close this one up here. Hopefully the next one I'll get into Lenny and some of those other connections, but this has just been unbelievable for me. So remember, just because you don't know the truth doesn't mean you can't have fun with the lie. All right, so until the next one, cheers, guys.